to the FanDuel defense analysis for Week 10. I'm Jason Gilbo at jgilbo11. Taking a look at cash game and GPP defenses. Got 5 lined up for you this week. Looking at the cash games here, Arizona Cardinals obviously coming as the top ones for me. 5,200 on FanDuel, taking on the 49ers at home. 49ers are a team that turned the ball over quite a bit, over 2 times per game this year. Have one of the lower team totals on the board this week, 17.25. Looking at Arizona, they have scored 2.5 more fantasy points at home this season compared to on the road. That's a trend that we saw last year, given their numbers away from home. They weren't particularly great on defense, especially in getting pressure on the quarterback. But this year, you're looking at 49ers, tied for the most would turn the ball over with Carolina and New York. They're allowing 2.25 sacks per game. Look at Arizona. I mean, they're a team that obviously the secondary matches up very well with, Jeremy Curley, Quentin Patton, those types of guys. No one particularly scares me this week for San Francisco. Solid run defense as well. So they're averaging 1.9 takeaways per game this year, scoring the 5th most fantasy points per defense. They've allowed just the 4th most real points on the season total. So Arizona's been quietly solid all year long. Had a couple down games, more knownly, obviously, against Carolina on the road. That was disappointing, but should definitely bounce back here, 5,200 at home against 49ers. So Washington Redskins is my next one here in terms of a value cash game play. 4,400, very cheap, taking on Minnesota at home. Opposing team total here, 19.75. Minnesota hasn't turned the ball over, but their offense is simply just trending in the other direction right now. And I think last week it took it for me to just know that, there's real no hope for this run game. There's no hope for much going on because of the offensive line right now. And the fact that you can put Josh Norman on Stephon Diggs, early in the week here, I'm hoping that should happen. Either way, we're going to see basically their best weapon be taken away in the passing attack. Really, you have Cordell Patterson out there, you have Kyle Rudolph, but this is a defense that does match up pretty well with what they have to offer. And just with the offensive line being absolutely awful right now, it doesn't look good for this Minnesota offense. So they're allowing 2.63 sacks per game right now. The running backs continue to struggle running the ball behind them. Washington is generating the 6th most sacks per season this year, 2.8. They've been playing pretty well coming into this week over the last few. They've allowed they've been over 7 FanDuel points in 5 of 8 games this season, with the exception to Dallas, Detroit, and Pittsburgh. So obviously I think they get the benefit of the doubt there, playing those types of teams and not having good weeks. But outside of that, they've been pretty solid this year. So team total under 20. I mean, Washington 4,400, a pretty decent value for me coming into this week. I think if you're looking to pivot off of a top price defense, you can certainly look at Washington at that price and kind of gain, nearly $800 from Arizona. So Washington's where I'm headed in terms of value. GPP defenses, looking at the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Jets on the road, 4,600. The Rams have been pretty solid of late. They've allowed just 24 points combined over the last 2 weeks against the Giants and the Panthers. They're coming off of a 5-sack performance against Cam Newton. Like this front 7, obviously Aaron Donald's just a phenomenal player. The Jets are allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing defenses. They've allowed 4 defensive touchdowns this season already. I like the Rams GPP flyer here. I mean, they're ranked inside the top 10 per Football Outsiders. They've done very well, limiting the ground game to just 98 yards per game this year and 246 through the air. Both are in the top half of the league. So they've been pretty solid on the defensive side of things. And as mentioned earlier, Carolina is a team that does turn the ball over 2.1 times per game. So I think the Rams at 4,600, GPP defense only. I'll definitely be looking to fire some shots with them. Another one here, Kansas City defense, 4,700. They're a borderline cash game defense for me as well. Talked about the Panthers turning the ball over quite a bit, allowing 2.63 sacks per game. So they have been giving up some upside and some turnovers to defenses this year. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing defenses. So Kansas City's been very solid. I mean, over the last 4 weeks, double-digit fantasy points in all all of those, and obviously 5 of the last 6, they've been over that mark with the exception of Pittsburgh. Once again, I think you get the benefit of the doubt there. The Chiefs lead the league in takeaways per game this year, 2.5, 7th best pass defense, and the run game is certainly starting to come around a little bit more. I think, once they get fully healthy, we'll see that kind of take a turn for kind of trending upwards. So I like the chances of another double-digit fantasy point performance this week. I think 4,700 is a really reasonable price tag. I don't like the fact that they're on the road. I think that's why I'm off of them, and they're more just a borderline cash game play. I think if they were at home, they'd be listed as a cash game option. Their home and road splits have been a little bit off this year. In Carolina, we know, can turn it on at any time, obviously, as we saw in the matchup against Arizona. So next one here is San Diego. Obviously, a 2-touchdown performance defensively last week against Marcus Mariota, but they still have been giving up a ton of real points. They've been in double-digit fantasy scoring in 3 of the last 4 games, though, so that is a plus. Their turnovers and everything that they're generating has made up for the fact that they are allowing a ton of points. Averaging 2 takeaways per game this year, have 11 interceptions on the board, even with all the injuries in the secondary that we've seen. Chargers have made way with a lot of kind of production as, the year's gone on, especially with Joey Bosa locking up that front 7. Chargers have allowed just 85.4 rushing yards per game this year. And, that's the 5th least in the NFL, with Jay Ajayi obviously finding a lot of success over the last few weeks. Miami's kind of turning the ball and just going run heavy, and that's helped Ryan Tannehill a little bit. If that's the case, if they can lock up Ajayi and kind of force Tannehill to throw the ball, we know the type of upside and turnover proneness he has. So I do like that, especially with these opportunistic secondary players. 22.5 total for the Dolphins here. I certainly think they're a reasonable, threat to, not necessarily go all in on the Chargers, but I do like the fact that there is some upside with this one, especially with them turning the ball over about 1.5 times per game. Our projection has them right around 9 points. Our cafe value is relatively high at 4,500, so I certainly like the upside that they have for the price. Out of the 5 here, Chargers probably my least likely. I think it's just more of a deep tournament play, just like it was last week. But they're in play as well. So I think you really should be focusing on the Redskins, Cardinals, and Chiefs. Those come in as my top 3 this week. I think Rams and Chargers are kind of the bottom 2 low ownership type plays for this week. So it's gonna wrap things up with the FanDuel defense analysis for Week 10. Be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com. Check out our great tools and content. If you want to read the article, be sure to check it out. It is up on the site now.